Two-handed pizzicato is my absolute favorite technique. If you hear me say I have a different favorite technique in a different video, I'm lying, because it's two-handed pizzicato all the way. It's so much fun. It looks really cool. Here's what it sounds like. So what I'm doing is my thumb is touching our harmonic, and then my my middle finger or my ring finger or my index finger is pulling the string. What I like about this technique is that your hands are doing the same thing. They're doing the same motion. We rarely get to do that, right? You know, our hands are usually kind of doing opposite, different things, and so it's kind of neat to almost be like a piano player and have our hands maybe moving at different times and in different positions, but doing the same motion. Some of the things, you see this piece, you see this effect in pieces like the Barrio Sequenza, most notably, that it has this effect all over the sequenza. It's also in a piece by Soviet Union era composer named Victor Suslin, and this piece is called, I'm going to butcher the title, Morgen dem Rungs music. It means like good morning music, I think. Super cool piece, has a lot of extended techniques in it. Not a lot of people play it, so it's a really neat kind of hidden treasure for the bass, I think. Anyway, some of the things to think about when working on two-handed pizzicato is that it's a very quiet technique. As you can hear, it's a very soft technique. I had to re-record this video because when I was the first take I did on this, I was playing it and a plane flew overhead, and you could barely hear the pizz notes because they're so quiet. Some of the ways to make it a little louder is making sure that your thumb is right on the node of the harmonic, where the harmonic will resonate the most, so that you can get a little more volume. It also takes a little bit of dexterity and a little stronger finger strength to pull the notes. For me, it kind of feels like you're pulling harder than the volume that you're getting out of the bass, so that's kind of something to adjust to. I learned this technique because I wanted to play the Barrio Sequenza. So when I started learning that piece, I figured out all the harmonic series on my instrument using my bow, and so I would just go up, turn on the tuner, go up each string as far as I could reach, and figure out where the notes were with my bow first, and then one hand at a time figured out what notes my thumb needed to be on with the tuner, making sure that I was getting the right note. It took a while. I definitely did it one hand at a time, learned one hand at a time, because it took a little while to get used to the motion. It took a little while to figure out the angle that my hand needed to be at. Most of the time your right hand will be on the A and the E string, and your left will be on the D and the G. In the sequenza, there's times where the D and the A are kind of interchangeable, which hand they can reach. I think about the motion as I try to emulate what a harpist does. If you've ever watched a harpist play, and you watch their wrists and their hands, it's a very graceful, very supple motion, and it's like they're drawing the music, the notes out of their instrument instead of like yanking them or pulling them out. You know, they're working with the instrument to draw those notes out. It's the same here. Think about drawing the notes out of your instrument instead of more aggressively trying to muscle them out. And I think of the same kind of wrist motion and finger motions that I see when I watch harpists play. Just the more graceful you can be, I think the more your bass will resonate with that. It's also important to think about your posture in this, especially when you're learning and you're up here a lot. Make sure to keep your shoulders down and relaxed. Keep your neck nice and nice and soft and not tight or tense. If it's, I find myself start to hunch my shoulders up, especially if I'm trying to reach higher partials. I'll tent my shoulders will kind of start to creep up. But if you keep your shoulders down and relax, that will really help a lot. I'm a little on the short side for a bass player, and so I have to step back in order to reach some of the higher notes that I want to. But it's also why I encourage improvisation, so that you can give your body time to figure out the mechanics of making this technique work. Take two-handed pizzicato, if you're working on this sequenza, take the two-handed pizz out of the context of the sequenza, and just improvise with the technique. Play with it. Find out how your body needs to adjust in order to let your thumbs be squarely on those the nodes of those harmonics. I think improvisation is so important. That makes this the skills more transferable. If you just learn something in the context of the piece you're playing in, it's not as easy for you to do that same technique when you see it in another piece. It's why we practice scales, and why a lot of us focus a lot of our practice time on scales. It's one of the many reasons we do that is so that scales can be transferable, and because they're all over the pieces that we play. It's the same with any extended technique, especially with two-handed pizz, because it is so kind of foreign, such kind of a foreign motion to execute. So I think improvisation, the more you can improvise with something, the easier it will be once you go back into the context of the piece that you're playing. One of the if you're having trouble getting a pitch out, think about the distance between your thumb and whatever finger you're using to pull the string. If you're too close, you kind of trip over your fingers. If you're too far away if your plucking fingers are too far away from your thumb, that can slowly start to drag your thumb away from where it needs to be, because all of our fingers are connected. So there is a sweet spot where you can have the most relaxed hand shape. If you're trying to reach down here, my fingers are tense and straight, but you want to find a way where you can pluck the string and also keep that nice curved hand shape that our hands naturally go to when they're relaxed. That will help you play this technique faster, especially in the sequenza. There's passages where these two-handed pizzas are very quick, and you need to have some speed on some speedy fingers to get it to happen. And so the only way to do that is to be relaxed. And so when you're improvising, experiment with, okay, what happens if I move my plucking fingers closer to my thumb? What happens if I move them further away from my thumb? And it changes based on where you are on the instrument. If you're down here, the fingers need to be a little further away from the thumb, whereas where you're up here, I think they need to be a little closer. But there's so many different variables with this technique, and so I think improvisation is the way to learn it, because it gives you time to make mistakes and to experiment, and not feel like, oh, I missed notes, or oh, I can't get this, or oh, the tempo marking says this and I'm not at that point yet. When you improvise, you can't do anything wrong. So every note that you play in improv when you're improvising with this technique can be like a discovery of what works okay, what works better, what maybe doesn't work the best. And then you don't have to feel like a failure when you can't get something in the context of a piece, if that makes sense. I think that's it. Again, one of my favorite techniques. I think it looks cool. We as musicians, we're visual performers as well as oral performers, and so I think it's important to think about visually how we're presenting ourselves. That's one of the reasons I love extended techniques, is because a lot of them look cool, a lot of them look interesting to watch people play, and two-handed pizzicato just looks really neat, which I think can only help a performance. All right, that's all I have for two-handed pizzicato. Go have fun with that one.